KK, and he talks a lot about Senator Dodd, not Christopher Dodd's father.
You mean Christopher Dodd's father?
Exactly.
Okay.
Robert Dodd, and there's a lot of great stories. There's hundreds of stories that Emery does, and he's a valuable resource. I suggest everybody.
So we're going to play that bite now?
We're going to play that
excited.
Bite on the Lone Nuts, and this is from a cut from a few years ago, but it's news that stays news. All his stuff is. And let's play Dave Emery.
Hello, my name's Dave Emery, and this pair of half-hour segments is entitled Caution, Lone Nuts at Work. The title derives from a very obvious and yet equally sad aspect of American political intellectual culture, namely the I was going to call it willingness, but really the compulsion on the part of American journalists, American institutions, and an awful lot of individuals to ascribe some of the broad-based operations of fascism, and in particular American fascism, to the work of lone nuts. This is something that we have seen invoked from the assassination of President Kennedy right on up through some of the recent Nazi outrages, such as the shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, and also the recent escapades of Buford Furrow down in Los Angeles. He is the Aryan Nations operative who shot up a bunch of school kids at a Jewish community center and executed, murdered in cold blood, a Filipino-American postman. As I speak on the evening of September 5th of 1999, the country's been treated to two more Nazi massacres. One, a fellow named Smith, who went off on July 4th weekend, and most recently Buford Furrow, whom we're going to talk about in just a minute. And the response has been, again, lone nuts. The Smith guy was a lone nut, and Furrow rather, is being hailed as a lone nut as well, someone with psychological problems. That reminds me of the original lone nut, who was Adolf Hitler. Hitler was often described as being a madman. Hitler wasn't a madman. He was a Nazi. Same thing with Furrow, same thing with Smith, same thing with those two little brats at Columbine High School and whoever they were working with, because it was obviously just more than those two kids. They're not nuts. They're Nazis, and that's important to understand because they're part of a much larger and more powerful milieu, and yet whenever that milieu manifests itself in terms of the daily events that are encompassing our world, the mainstream press as well as the so-called alternative media and an awful lot of other people ascribe it to the workings of lone nuts. I would add this is a form of political chicanery and journalistic and intellectual chicanery that is well established in this country, and indeed the ascribing of the workings of fascism to the depredations of a lone nut is something that we have been treated to ever since the assassination of President Kennedy. And in fact, in the course of the broadcast this evening, I'm going to point out areas of overlap between the workings of lone nuts such as, quote, Buford Furrow, or the workings of, quote, lone nuts, unquote, such as Buford Furrow and the milieu he's part of, with the assassination of President Kennedy. One of the things that led many people to cover up the assassination of President Kennedy, who had known what had happened up to a point, was that there was an elaborate attempt, and we're going to cover that attempt in a minute, but there was an elaborate attempt to make the killing appear to be the work of communists, either the Soviet Union and or Castro's Cuba. In fact, the fascist elements that did this went to great lengths to set up that cover, and that in turn led a lot of people to cover up the killing because they were afraid that if, in fact, the public perceived that a popular president had been murdered by communism, that this would lead to a Third World War. Once again, the Oswald as lone nut, alternating with Oswald as perhaps commie tool, is once again making news. When Boris Yeltsin met with Bill Clinton earlier this year, he gave him the KGB files on Lee Harvey Oswald, and the media, despite the fact that these files are certainly not pointing in the direction of the Soviets as the author of this killing, are once again being twisted to hint that perhaps the Soviets or communists were behind the assassination of President Kennedy, whereas in fact they were not.
Okay, there's Dave Emery, a little clip from him. We don't, it goes on. I've taken a choice cut of his stuff. He is excellent, and here he's talking about how the media always put forward this false lone nut theory as a part of covering up what's really happening behind the scenes.
Well, certainly are a lot of lone nuts out there then, aren't there?
Yeah.
We've had a number of the sleepers awakened.
And of course
recently.
It was Mae Brussel who showed that the the coup d'etat of November 20, the Dallas Dealey Plaza coup d'etat was when the Nazi International and the fascists took back control of the United States. If you find that hard to believe, just take a look at the Bush family and how they put
Bush family tree?
read the book Hitler Was a British Agent and see who financed and why the government of the United States went after Prescott Bush and tried to arrest him for trading with the enemy and putting Germany, financing Nazi Germany. Wow. Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's general, took over the CIA. Our intelligence agency, the OSS, got closed down. Hey, if we won the war, Mrs. Steele, how come our intelligence agency got shut down? Fritz Kramer, Hitler's general at the Battle of the Bulge, took over and became chief plans officer at the Pentagon. Von Braun, his other general, took over NASA. And Dr. Mengele wound up at China Lake, California, with an electron microscope and a Cray computer, breeding clones and Mengele men, of which Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of the boys from Brazil.
We're the lost sheep of Israel,
okay.
Lenny. I think
That's
we need to get on the
Yes.
tribes. I mean, where can they be?
Well, let's go to our video here. Now, here, Mrs. Steele, here, this is an interesting subject because it's typical. You know, McLuhan said that puny secrets need protection, but not big secrets, because the big secrets are protected by public incredulity. It's hidden right out in the open.
Well, it's hidden right in plain sight, isn't
and
it?
right in plain
I mean,
sight.
it's right in your face.
Exactly.
It's all in our vernacular. We use the expressions that are all from that era, from the word.
Exactly.
It's part of our language.
Yeah, the master
ABCs.
key, the lost master key, has been found, and here it is.
Are we going to find out who
the
we
lost
are?
10 tribes have been lost, and now they're found. Now here we have the.
Could they be the lost sheep of Israel?
Yes.
Lenny?
That's right, but
I think they
what's
are, aren't
important
they?
to realize
Yeah.
is the name Israel was not given to the Jews.
Do they know that?
The Jews are at war with Israel the first time the word Jew is mentioned in the scripture. And here are the 12 tribes, and each one of these are the sons of Jacob. Right, Mrs. Steele?
Yes, they are.
And here are the 12
So you've got
sons.
Manasseh,
Manasseh,
Asher,
yep,
Naphtali,
yep,
Zebulon,
yep,
Issachar,
yep,
Gad,
yep,
Ephraim,
right,
Dan,
yep,
Benjamin,
yep,
Reuben,
yep,
Simeon,
yes,
and
Judah.
Judah.
And that's where all the Jews descend from. They are the descendants of that man.
Where are the lost
But
sheep of Israel, Lenny? Won't
descendants of-
somebody give us just a clue?
Well, here they are, Mrs. Steele.
Could they be found in dear old?
Here they are. We got them right here.
There we are. Let's
There
find
we
out
go.
where they're from.
There we go. Today, Ephraim is in Britain.
You know what that word means? It means Britain means
Covenant man.
Covenant man.
Right, right. And isn't it interesting that the Union Jack, Jacob.
It's Jacob. The
Yeah.
Union Jacob.
Jack, exactly. So it's right there. And we'll come back later and
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
show
come back
how the Star of David is not Jewish at all. It represented all of Israel, of
Yep.
which only
Yep.
1/12 of Israel. In other words, Britain is a Hebrew nation. Not Jewish, but Hebrew. It's a Hebrew nation. Hebrew, the word Hebrew comes from the word Eber, which was Abraham's grandfather.
Exactly. And
Now,
then you've got Manasseh,
The tribe
which
of Manasseh.
is America.
Right now, Ephraim,
Yeah.
Manasseh, if you go back to are the sons of Joseph. So there were 12 sons, but Joseph had 2 boys, and they were both adopted by Jacob. He
were
adopted
adopted.
his grandsons and made them equal to the
Now, did Jacob receive
let me
the
just finish.
covenant promise
Let
from
me just
God?
finish. What
Isn't that
Jacob
what
did,
happened?
Jacob
Yeah.
adopted his grandsons as sons. So his grandsons had the same status as his sons. Or in other words, Ephraim and Manasseh were now equal, the nephews were equal to the uncles. So for instance, Uncle Judah is now equal to the uncle Judah is now equal to his nephew. And most of the money and the wealth that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob went to Joseph's